Case number 10, the 1561 Nuremberg Sky Battle. On the morning of April 14, 1561, the citizens of Nuremberg, Germany, witnessed something that still defies explanation. According to a broadsheet published that same month by printer Hans Glasser, hundreds of people watched as spheres, cylinders, and cross-shaped objects filled the dawn sky, appearing to engage in aerial combat. The spectacle lasted approximately 1 hour before several objects reportedly crashed to Earth outside the city, leaving behind smoke and fire. Glazer's woodcut illustration depicts the event in remarkable detail. Black and red spheres emerging from cylindrical tubes, crosses, and a large black triangular shape. The accompanying text describes the citizens as terrified, believing they were witnessing divine warning or demonic activity. Church records from the period confirm that special prayers were held in the days following, though these documents make no specific mention of the aerial phenomena. Here's where it gets complicated. No official government record of the event exists. No contemporary letters from Nuremberg's merchants, scholars, or clergy describe what they saw. We have Glazer's broadsheet and nothing else from a city of 40,000 people. Skeptics argue this was likely a sundog phenomenon, atmospheric optical illusions caused by ice crystals refracting sunlight. These can create the appearance of multiple suns, halos, and geometric shapes. The human mind, they say, did the rest, interpreting natural phenomena through a religious lens. But believers counter that sundogs don't move, don't appear to fight each other, and certainly don't crash to the ground. They point out that Renaissance Germans knew their sky well. These were people who tracked harvests by celestial movements. My take? Something happened that morning in Nuremberg. Whether it was atmospheric, extraterrestrial, or mass hysteria, I can't say. But one broadsheet isn't evidence. It's a starting point. Case number 9, the 1917 Fatima solar miracle. 70,000 people gathered in a muddy field near Fatima, Portugal on October 13, 1917, and what happened next would make headlines across Europe. Following months of reported Marian apparitions witnessed by 3 shepherd children, the crowd had been promised a miracle. According to newspaper accounts published the next day, they got one. Witnesses described the sun appearing to dance, spin, and plunge toward the earth in a zigzag pattern. People fell to their knees, convinced the world was ending. The secular newspaper O Seculo, no friend to the Catholic Church, ran the story on its front page. Reporter Avelino de Almeida, who had previously mocked the apparitions, wrote that he witnessed the same phenomena as the believers around him. Photographs from that day show the massive crowd looking skyward. Testimonies collected in subsequent church investigations describe the wet ground and clothing of attendees drying almost instantly during the event. Multiple accounts mention seeing different colored lights emanating from the sun. The skeptical explanation centers on a phenomenon called solar retinopathy, temporary visual disturbances caused by staring at the sun. Mass suggestion, combined with the physical damage of direct solar viewing, could produce hallucinations of movement and color. Notably, no astronomical observatories anywhere in the world recorded unusual solar activity that day. Yet believers point out that not everyone present saw the same thing. Some reported a spinning disk, others saw nothing unusual at all. If this were simple sun-gazing damage, wouldn't the effects be uniform? The Vatican officially recognized the event as miraculous in 1930, but recognition isn't proof. I've read dozens of testimonies from that day. These weren't credulous peasants. Doctors, lawyers, engineers were present. Something affected their perception. Whether it originated in the sky or in their minds remains an open question. Case number 8, the 1994 Rua, Zimbabwe school encounter. On September 16, 1994, 62 children at Ariel School in Rua, Zimbabwe rushed back from morning recess in a state of panic. They claimed a silver craft had landed in the field adjacent to their schoolyard, and small beings with large eyes had emerged, communicating telepathic warnings about environmental destruction. What makes this case remarkable isn't just the number of witnesses, it's the consistency of their accounts. Harvard psychiatrist John Mack arrived in Zimbabwe 2 months later and conducted extensive interviews with the children. His recorded sessions show kids as young as 6 describing the same details. The beings' tight black suits, their enormous eyes, the craft's position near a grove of trees. Teachers confirmed the children's distress was genuine and immediate. No adult at the school witnessed the event directly. The teachers were in a staff meeting during morning break. By the time they responded to the commotion, whatever the children saw was gone. No physical evidence was recovered from the field. No landing marks, no radiation, nothing. Skeptics point to the well-documented phenomenon of childhood confabulation and the power of suggestion. Once one child describes seeing something, others may have unconsciously adopted and embellished the narrative. Zimbabwe in 1994 had limited television access, but UFO imagery had permeated global culture. The counter-argument is straightforward. Interview these witnesses today, 30 years later, and they haven't changed their stories. Several have become doctors, teachers, professionals with no incentive to maintain a childhood hoax. Their drawings from 1994 remain strikingly similar to each other. I don't know what those children saw. I know that 62 kids don't spontaneously invent identical details. Whether they witnessed something extraterrestrial or experienced a shared psychological event, Ariel School remains genuinely inexplicable. Case number 7. The 1976 Tehran UFO incident. This one comes with official documentation, and that's precisely what makes it interesting. On September 19, 1976, Iranian Air Force jets were scrambled to intercept an unknown object over Tehran after multiple citizens flooded phone lines with reports of a brilliant light in the sky. According to a U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency report declassified years later, 2 F-4 Phantom jets were dispatched. The first pilot reported his instruments malfunctioned as he approached the object. The second pilot, now at close range, attempted to fire an AIM-9 missile when a smaller object appeared to detach and move toward him. His weapons control panel went dead. Both pilots reported the object moved at speeds and angles impossible for conventional aircraft. The DIA assessment, signed by multiple intelligence officers, evaluated the report as a legitimate unknown aerial encounter. Ground radar at Mehrabad Airport confirmed anomalous returns. The incident was witnessed by military personnel, civilian authorities, and hundreds of Tehran residents who had stepped outside to observe the commotion. Yet Iranian Air Force records from this period are incomplete. The aircraft maintenance logs that might confirm the instrument failures are missing. No photographs exist. The primary witnesses were military officers whose careers might benefit from an exciting story. Conspiracy theorists argue the U.S. government took this incident seriously precisely because Iran was still a close American ally in 1976. They suggest similar incidents over American cities have been more aggressively suppressed. My assessment? This is one of the most credible UFO cases on record because skeptics can't easily dismiss it. Government documents, multiple military witnesses, radar confirmation. It checks boxes that most sightings don't. What those pilots encountered remains officially unexplained. Case number 6. The Battle of Los Angeles. In the early morning hours of February 25, 1942, anti-aircraft batteries across Los Angeles opened fire on what military officials believed was a Japanese aerial attack. Over 1,400 rounds of ammunition were expended. Air raid sirens wailed, searchlights crisscrossed the sky, and millions of Angelenos watched from their windows, porches, and rooftops. The next morning, newspapers ran photographs showing searchlight beams converging on something over the city. The Long Beach Independent reported that eyewitnesses described a large, dark object moving slowly across the sky. Several people died during the chaos, 3 from heart attacks, 2 from car accidents in the blackout conditions, and at least 1 from falling shrapnel. Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox held a press conference later that day, dismissing the incident as a false alarm triggered by war nerves and weather balloons. But Secretary of War Henry Stimson contradicted him, suggesting unidentified aircraft had indeed been present over the city. Here's the problem. If Japanese planes were there, where did they go? No enemy aircraft were shot down. No bombs were dropped. No debris was recovered. If it was just weather balloons, why did trained military personnel fire over 1,000 rounds at them? The explanation that it was war jitters doesn't account for the physical object captured in photographs. The official U.S. Air Force explanation, issued in 1983, attributed the incident to weather balloons and a case of jumpy nerves following Pearl Harbor. This satisfied almost no one. What I find compelling is the photographic evidence. That famous image shows something. A roughly oval shape illuminated by converging searchlights. Whether it was extraterrestrial, experimental aircraft, or atmospheric phenomena, millions of witnesses saw something that night. The records just can't agree on what. Case the number 5, the 1986 Brazil UFO night. On the night of May 19, 1986, 21 unidentified objects were tracked on radar by air traffic control centers across southeastern Brazil. The Brazilian Air Force scrambled 6 military jets to intercept. What followed became the most documented military UFO encounter in South American history. Air Force Minister Brigadier General Octavio Moreira Lima held an unprecedented press conference afterward, confirming that the objects had been tracked at speeds exceeding Mach 15, far beyond any known aircraft capability. Radar operators in São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and Brasilia all confirmed the contacts. At least one pilot reported his onboard radar locked onto a target before it accelerated away. Colonel Osiris Silva, president of the Brazilian oil company Petrobras and a former Air Force officer, was flying his private plane that night and reported seeing the objects personally. His credibility was beyond reproach. This was one of Brazil's most respected public figures. The incident was widely covered in Brazilian media. Thousands of civilian witnesses reported seeing lights moving in impossible patterns across the night sky. Air traffic recordings captured controller conversations as they tried to make sense of what their instruments were showing them. Yet no photographs emerged. No physical evidence was recovered. And notably, American military and intelligence agencies showed no apparent interest in objects that had clearly penetrated the airspace of the Western Hemisphere's largest nation. Skeptics argue that temperature inversions can create false radar returns and that the objects were likely misidentified conventional aircraft or atmospheric phenomena. Brazil's radar systems in 1986 were not state-of-the-art, but I've read the transcripts. I've listened to pilot interviews. These weren't excitable civilians. They were trained military officers and experienced aviators. They scrambled 6 jets at substantial expense. Someone in the Brazilian government believed something was there. Case number 4, the 1952 Washington D.C. flap. For 2 consecutive weekends in July 1952, unidentified objects appeared over the nation's capital, tracked on radar by multiple facilities and witnessed by thousands of people on the ground. It remains the only time in American history that jets were scrambled to defend Washington, D.C. from an unknown aerial threat. On the night of July 19th, air traffic controllers at Washington National Airport detected a formation of objects on radar traveling at speeds between 100 and 7,800 miles per hour. Andrews Air Force Base confirmed the contacts on their own equipment. Civilian pilot Casey Pierman, flying Capital Airlines Flight 807, reported seeing 6 bright lights that moved at incredible speed. Similar sightings recurred the following weekend. The story made front-page news nationwide. The Air Force held its largest press conference since World War II, where Major General John Samford attributed the sightings to temperature inversions, creating false radar returns. But radar operators who were present that night disputed this explanation, pointing out that they knew what temperature inversions looked like. This wasn't that. Photographs taken during the incidents show lights over the Capitol building, though their nature remains disputed. What isn't disputed is that the president himself, Harry Truman, demanded answers from his military advisors. CIA documents later declassified show the agency was concerned about the war of the nerves implications if the public believed Washington could be penetrated by unknown craft. The records exist, but they contradict each other. Radar confirmed the objects. Temperature inversions were blamed. Pilots saw lights. Project Blue Book investigated and concluded insufficient data. Thousands of Washingtonians looked up that July and saw something over their city. The government spent 2 weeks explaining why they didn't. Case the number 3, the Phoenix Lights. On the evening of March 13, 1997, thousands of Arizona residents reported seeing a V-shaped formation of lights traveling silently across the state. Witnesses included pilots, police officers, doctors, and sitting Governor Fife Symington. The sightings stretched from the Nevada border to Tucson. a distance of over 300 miles. The scale of this event is what makes it remarkable. We're not talking about a handful of witnesses in a rural area. We're talking about populated cities, major highways, an estimated 10,000 observers. Tim Lay and his family watched from their Phoenix home as an enormous dark object passed directly overhead, blocking out the stars. He estimated its wingspan at over a mile. Video footage exists, though its quality is poor. Amateur recordings show a formation of lights moving in unison, maintaining their spacing perfectly. Air traffic control at Sky Harbor International Airport received multiple calls, but reported nothing unusual on radar, a detail that either undermines the sightings or suggests something that didn't register on conventional equipment. 6 months later, the Air Force announced that Maryland Air National Guard planes had dropped illumination flares over the Barry-Goldwater Range that night. This became the official explanation, and Governor Symington held a press conference with an aide dressed in an alien costume, apparently mocking those who believed they'd seen something unusual. But years later, Symington reversed course. In a 2007 interview, he admitted he had witnessed the lights himself and believed the flare explanation was inadequate. The lights he saw, he said, were clearly attached to a massive structure, not falling flares. The Phoenix lights present an impossible choice. Either 10,000 people, including a governor, simultaneously misidentified military flares, or something flew over Arizona that night that officially doesn't exist. Case number 2, the miracle of the sun at Medjugorje. Since June 1981, the small village of Medjugorje in Bosnia-Herzegovina has drawn over 30 million pilgrims based on claims that 6 local children began receiving visitations from the Virgin Mary. But what brings this case into our investigation isn't the apparitions themselves. It's the recurring mass phenomena reported by visitors. Thousands of pilgrims have reported witnessing the sun spinning, changing colors, and descending toward Earth while visiting the site. These accounts mirror the 1917 Fatima events almost exactly. Video footage exists from the 1980s showing crowds reacting in real time to what they claim is supernatural solar activity. Tour groups from dozens of countries have reported the same phenomena, often to their own surprise. The Vatican has never officially recognized the Medjugorje apparitions, and Pope Francis has publicly expressed skepticism. Medical examinations of the original visionaries during their alleged ecstasies showed abnormal brain patterns, though interpretations of this data vary wildly. The skeptical explanation is compelling. Visitors arrive expecting miracles, stare at the sun against all medical advice, and experience predictable optical distortions. The power of suggestion, combined with religious fervor and physical eye damage, creates the illusion of supernatural phenomena. No astronomical observatory has ever recorded unusual solar activity coinciding with the Medjugorje reports. Yet the consistency troubles me. Skeptics who visited intending to debunk have reported experiencing the same phenomena. Different nationalities, different decades, different religious backgrounds, describing identical visual effects. Mass suggestion is real. Expectation shapes perception. But Medjugorje has been visited by journalists, scientists, and confirmed skeptics who came away shaken. Either millions of people are experiencing identical delusions, or something is happening in that village that our instruments aren't equipped to measure. Case number 1, the Rendlesham Forest Incident. In the early hours of December 26, 1980, U.S. Air Force personnel stationed at RAF Bentwaters and RAF Woodbridge in Suffolk, England, encountered something in the adjacent Rendlesham Forest. What unfolded over 3 nights would become the most documented military UFO encounter in British history, and perhaps the most contentious. Staff Sergeant Jim Peniston and Airman John Burroughs were dispatched to investigate lights in the forest, initially believed to be a downed aircraft. What Peniston encountered, according to his sworn statement, was a triangular craft of unknown origin sitting in a clearing. He approached close enough to touch it, later describing symbols etched into its surface resembling hieroglyphics. His pocket notebook from that night contains drawings of the craft. Deputy Base Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt led a subsequent investigation on December 28th, bringing radiation detection equipment that registered elevated readings at the original landing site. Holt recorded an audio memo during this investigation that was later released through Freedom of Information requests. On that recording, you can hear Halt and his team reacting in real time to lights moving through the trees, at one point exclaiming that a beam of light had descended near them. Ground traces were documented. Tree damage consistent with something having passed through the canopy was photographed. Dozens of military personnel across 3 shifts reported unusual phenomena. But here's where the official record fails us. The British Ministry of Defense investigated and concluded the incident posed no threat to national security, conspicuously not addressing what actually happened. RAF radar showed no unusual activity, though base radar had been taken offline for maintenance. Local police who responded initially attributed the lights to the Orford Ness Lighthouse 5 miles away. The lighthouse theory doesn't account for the landing traces. It doesn't explain the radiation readings. It doesn't explain why Lieutenant Colonel Halt, a career military officer with nothing to gain and everything to lose, has spent 4 decades insisting he saw something intelligently controlled in that forest. Peniston has passed multiple polygraph examinations regarding his account. Burroughs successfully sued the U.S. government in 2015 for medical benefits related to radiation exposure he allegedly received that night. A case settled out of court, suggesting the government didn't want his service records entered into evidence. This case has everything: multiple credible witnesses, physical evidence, official documentation, audio recordings, and 40 years of consistent testimony from men who served their country honorably. The official record doesn't deny the event. It simply refuses to explain it. Something landed in Rendlesham Forest in December 1980. British and American governments have the classified files to prove what it was. Until those files are released, this case remains what it's been for 4 decades, officially unexplained.